All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack what is honestly a fascinating and highly esoteric source text. What we're looking at today is a theoretical framework for manipulating time and literally halting the aging process, all through some incredibly intense mental and spiritual practices. It's a bold text, it completely blends physics metaphors with ancient spirituality, and we're going to break the whole thing down. To make sense of this strict dualistic framework of matter versus mind, here's our roadmap. We'll be hitting the mechanics of time, the antimatter universe, ancient wisdom, going against the train, the worldly burden, and finally, escaping the z-axis. So starting off with part 1, the mechanics of time and how it connects to motion and matter. Right off the bat, the source lays down its core premise. Time only exists within the material world, and it's generated entirely by motion, and the author uses some really grounded, everyday examples for this. Think about low motion. Food sitting in a fridge lasts longer simply because its molecular motion is slowed down. Or take a car. Drive at 10,000 kilometers a year, and hey, it might last you 30 years. But on the flip side, high motion. Driving that same car 30,000 kilometers a year, you're going to burn it out fast. The author maps this exact logic directly onto human behavior. A stressed out, highly emotional person is basically operating at high motion, which leads to rapid decay. So it turns out the secret to quote-unquote surmounting time might just be acting a little bit more like a leftover casserole. Stepping away from immediate desires, reducing your emotional motion, and just finding stillness. Moving right along to part 2, the antimatter universe and the timeless mind. So how exactly do we achieve that absolute stillness? Well, the source completely hijacks a scientific term here. In this framework, antimatter has absolutely nothing to do with subatomic particles. Instead, the author defines it strictly as the human spirit, your consciousness, your belief, and the soul. The text argues that these intangible things connect to what they call a negative universe, an anti-world where time just flat out does not exist. The logic goes, if time only exists in the material world, then fully tapping into our pure consciousness allows us to break free from aging altogether. Which brings us to section 3, ancient wisdom and finding a universal pattern. To back up these pretty massive claims, the author leans on historical heavyweights, claiming there's a universal consensus here. First up is Lao Tzu, a foundational figure in Taoism. This quote highlights the immense power of stillness. According to this framework, that concept of non-action perfectly aligns with reducing material motion, so you can literally halt the creation of time. Then, the text layers in wisdom from Shakyamuni the Buddha to reinforce this pattern. This is used to suggest that true power and understanding come from an unattached, formless consciousness, which is exactly what the author would categorize as tapping into that timeless antimatter energy. Next, we see a quote from Muhammad. This is brought in to really emphasize the strict divide between the timeless, eternal value of the inner spirit and the decaying, time-bound nature of worldly belongings and wealth. And finally, bringing in Jesus, the text ties all these diverse teachings together into one neat package. The author is arguing that all these historical figures were pointing to the exact same metaphysical truth. Our ultimate destination and our mastery over time itself is entirely dictated by where we focus our consciousness. Basically, if you focus on the material, you're bound by time. But if you focus on the heart and the spirit, you tap into eternity. All right, part 4, going against the train or reversing time. Okay, up to this point, things have been incredibly abstract. But here the author gives us a really vivid, mechanical analogy for reversing time. Imagine time as a moving train, and we are all just passengers on it. Step 1 is the default mode. You're just sitting on the train, moving forward with it. That's normal aging. Step 2 is where the practice kicks in. You start running backward inside the train at the exact same speed the train is moving forward. Relative to the ground outside, you're perfectly still. You've halted time and aging. Then there's step 3, the ultimate goal, running backward faster than the train is moving forward. This lets you enter negative time and literally reclaim your youth. But the text throws up a massive warning sign here. This speed is strictly non-material. Going against the time is purely a high-level, reverse approach to your own thinking. That leads us right into section 5, the worldly burden, and why this is basically impossible. Look, as incredible as reclaiming your youth sounds, the author is totally upfront here. They say going against time is like boating upstream, and it is nearly impossible for the average person. Why? Because we are completely weighed down by worldly burdens. And it's not just the big flashy temptations like fame or power. The author explicitly lists out completely mundane responsibilities: taking care of your elderly parents, being there for your spouse, raising your kids, paying the bills. Being wrapped up in these material realities keeps our motion super high, which makes it totally impossible to achieve that spiritual speed you'd need to outrun the train of time. So, just impartially reporting what the author is putting down, there's a really stark conclusion here. This whole practice goes against natural laws, and honestly, it's genuinely only meant for monastic individuals, people in Buddhist and Taoist temples who have fully removed themselves from secular society. The author basically warns that if a regular person tries to do this without dedicating their entire life to it, they're just going to crash and burn. You wouldn't be able to function in daily life, and you still wouldn't attain any spiritual youth. And finally, Section 6, Escaping the Z-axis, and the ultimate purpose of all this. This is where the whole esoteric puzzle clicks into place, because as the text reveals, halting your aging, that isn't actually the end goal at all. It's really just a hack to buy yourself more time to practice. The real goal is to refine the soul. The author introduces this concept of the Z-axis. They argue that if you manage to refine your spiritual body during this extended lifetime, right at the moment of physical death, your spirit can travel along this Z-axis. This trajectory lets you completely cross space and time, breaking out of this universe entirely to enter a higher-level structural world. So physical immortality isn't the point. Escaping the material plane entirely is the point. Which leaves us with a pretty intense question. If you follow the logic of the source text, the absolute price of transcending time is total, uncompromising detachment from everything material. Your family, your ambitions, your everyday life, it all has to go. It really makes you wonder, if you actually had the power to run backward on that train of time, would the cost of immortality ultimately be worth it to you? It is a fascinating, profound trade-off hidden inside a seriously complex framework. Let that sink in for a bit.